January and ramping up the first month in the new year. 2018 is going to look like. Welcome everyone. Hope you had a very great weekend. Let's get the show started. Your Business Morning live from Channel's global headquarters in Nigeria. It was most of last week all at Davos in Switzerland, the 2018 edition of the World Economic Forum, the annual gatherings of world leaders, also attended by Nigeria's team led by the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, and there was a press statement of what was released about some of the questions that the VP was asked on a panel which he attended in Davos, and this was issued on Friday. And part of what the Vice President says has been causing a bit of some upset on social media over the last couple of hours about jobs creation. But let's take it a little bit from the top, what the Vice President actually says in the press statement issued from his media office. Quote, a lot of what we are talking about is collaboration, economic collaboration against terrorism and all manners of extremist behaviors. That is what I am taking away. The Vice President was asked what is takeaway from the Davos 4-day annual gatherings, and he says it's about economic collaboration on war against terrorism and other manners of extreme behaviors. He says that was his takeaway. But according to the VP, he went on to say to another question that the critical thing is that the man on the streets, that's Nigerians, must feel the impact of what the Buhari's administration is doing, which he says sometimes takes a while, because when you are talking about growth, there must be jobs, but growth doesn't immediately translate to jobs. That's what the Vice President says. And he went on to add that when you look at youth unemployment, for the first time in the history of this country, we have employed 200,000 graduates. There is no administration that has done that. And he went on to say that 200,000 young people by our government through one specific program, and we are doing 300,000 more this year. That's in 2018. So we're hoping to employ 500,000 graduates. Conclusively, this is what the VP says. What is important to bear in mind is that we have changed the model of government in Nigeria substantially. We place emphasis on good governance, especially financial prudence, which is very crucial. And talking about financial prudence, the Honorable Minister of Finance yesterday, Sunday, presides over the meeting of a whistleblower unit of the Ministry of Finance and the Presidential Initiative on Continuous Audit of Government Agencies. The Finance Chief says the federal government is now conducting investigations into 200 whistleblowing tips on tax officials and taxpayers on under-declaration of taxes, demand by taxpayers, and receipt of gratifications by some tax officials of the Federal Inland Revenue Service. The Finance Minister says the MOF has therefore requested and secured suspension of 2 senior tax officials in Delta and Benue states based on verified tips from whistleblowers. Let's keep that aside and go to the markets, and that's where the conversation today is starting. The Nigerian Stock Exchange today begins a new pricing or par value rules approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. In summary, this is what the rule means, that the specifying revised price limit, the price movement, and the tick sizes at the price floor, the minimum pricing increments, and quantity to be traded to change of the published price of stocks. It looks a little bit mouthful, but essentially what the stock exchange is trying to do is to set a new price limit, the volume of shares that you need to move those stocks, and that goes into what you call the penny stocks or par value. A par value is the value of that stock, that is the bottom price of which is stock. It was initially set at 50 kobo many years ago, but now the stock exchange has revised the rules and is now implementing what you call a rock bottom pricing for securities. The stock exchange is therefore looking to classify equity securities into different price groups in order to achieve the pricing methodology. And the end objective is to improve liquidity, narrow the spreads, and ensure all price improving transactions are material. Up and down, you want to move stock on the exchange by whatever price they price it. How you arrive at that has to be material. That's something that if you're in the market, you already know. Making for an efficient market for all participants. So the stock exchange will be introducing a new price group called Group C. Give us the rest of this week to unpack the entire new pricing model, what you call the new par value for you. Some stocks are already traded well below 50, some are 25 kobo, and some are below that. The new price level will be around 1 kobo per share. But the market we're starting with Obiani Junsofo, who is one of the investment analysts at Afrinvest, is the fixed income. A very decent January for the debt management office, rolling out about 250 billion in the first auction in the new year. That's a very nice way to start the new debt office calendar for 2018. Obiani, good morning. It's good to have you here.
Good morning, boss.
That was a good one last week, isn't it?
Yes, it was.
Yes, a very decent way to get the new year started. Yeah. So where do we find the yield curve on this particular auction that we flagged off in 2018?
Well, in a years, as of 2016, we saw like an inverted yield curve. I mean, investors sort of paid attention towards the short-term end of the yield curve. But what we've seen as of late last year is that there's been a flattening of the yield curve. So, I mean, this is all attributed to the ongoing activities in the fixed income space. The federal government is sort of leveraging on single-digit borrowing in the foreign space rather than opt for double digits for the local investors. So they've actually stopped the longer tenor instruments for bonds as well as the OMO instruments, and sort of reduced treasury bills auctions.
Yes, but again, if you look at what the debt office raised last week, 215 thereabout, that's quite significant above what its expectation was, despite the fact that the yields for FGN bonds is shrinking, and we've seen that bond yields around plus or minus 350 basis points over the last 1 year.
Well, definitely. Before I talk about that, I think it's pertinent to look at the treasury bills auction that was held in the previous week. So we saw the 91-day, the 182 and the 364-day instrument